Hello and welcome to another episode of the Men for Life podcast. This is Sean Corcoran, the CEO of Men for Life, where we are working to change the narrative that men have no voice in the pro-life movement and replace it with a new truth that real men are protectors, providers, pro-family, pro-woman, and pro-life. Today our guest is Heather Lawless. Heather is a national pro-life speaker, leadership coach, and the founder and CEO of Reliance Ministries, an organization devoted to providing holistic, life-affirming support to women, men, and families facing unexpected pregnancies. Through Reliance Center, a medical pregnancy clinic in Lewiston, Idaho, Reliance House, a transformational maternity home, and initiatives like Reliance Men and Braveheart Coffee, Heather and her team are breaking cycles of trauma and shame with the hope and truth of the gospel. Heather's life was spared from abortion, and she later faced her own unplanned pregnancy. A former single mom who once believed she had ruined her life, Heather knows firsthand the power of redemption. Her story includes surviving the pain of addiction and betrayal in her marriage, and ultimately discovering the identity and healing that only Christ can offer. She now uses that testimony to reach others, especially women carrying shame from their sexual past or pain from abortion, abuse, or sexual trauma. Heather's new book, We Do Talk About It, is a raw, redemptive collection of stories from the front lines of ministry, where shame meets truth and trauma meets the healing love of Jesus. Drawing from years of counseling women in crisis and her own journey, Heather confronts cultural lies about sex, identity, and worth, and invites readers into a bold, grace-filled conversation the church has avoided for too long. How are you today, Heather?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. I'd like to just jump straight into the book if you're okay with that. I've read the book. I think it's amazing. I know I texted you and I said that I cried twice at two different points. And I don't shy away from the fact that I cry, but I rarely cry when I'm reading a book. And I think what's important about it is that it connected to me as a man, even though the book was written to women, you know, and I think there's a message there for everybody, but it was written to women, right?
Yeah, more geared towards women, but there is a couple messages in there for men who are struggling with sexual shame also. Yeah.
So what brought you to wanting to write this book?
Well, I have struggled with my worth and my identity my entire life pretty much. And so when I first got involved in the pro-life movement, one of the very first days that I had working at a pregnancy center, and this is how the book opens too. But this is what was the catalyst was we were in a staff meeting and we were talking about the sexual exposure chart. And the sexual exposure chart is a chart that we use that shows people how your sexual exposure has been. You know, if you've been with 4 partners and they've each been with 4 partners, then there's this multiplication thing, and it basically shows you your sexual risk. And when we were going through the chart, we got to the bottom of it and I made it was just very clinical and very cold. And they were talking about this chart, like women who have had all these partners are kind of, you know, should be castaways and have a scarlet letter. And so when I saw that, I made some comment about how my partner count wasn't even on there and how cool is it that God can still use a mess like me. And the director of the center looked at me and said, "We don't talk about that." And I said, "We don't talk about what?" And he said, "We don't talk about things like that. It's inappropriate." And I remember thinking, how can we not talk about our past and what God's done and sit knee to knee with a woman who's struggling with this huge decision about abortion or struggling with the decisions of her past, or talk to a man about the decisions of his past if we can't even talk about our own past? And so that just spurred it. And so for 3 years, I've been writing using my story and stories from other women that I've heard and other men that I've heard. And this is just kind of a wake up call to the world about being able to talk about that, because Jesus doesn't want all the perfect pieces of us. He wants the shattered, broken pieces too.
Right. And I think it's kind of not only dismissive, but it misses the point to suggest that in a ministry where we are ministering to broken people, that we're not going to talk about our own brokenness. You know, it's almost as if that conversation, that comment made that person uncomfortable. And that's why he didn't want to talk about it. But these are uncomfortable conversations. I mean, the conversations that you're having with people are uncomfortable from their standpoint.
Yeah, but that's what we're called to do. The gospel isn't comfortable. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the most uncomfortable thing that there is, but that's what changes us. And so if we're afraid about uncomfortable conversations and we're afraid about being messy and being real and having people see what's really inside of us, then I mean, we're just a bunch of fake hypocrites walking around.
That's right. And there's a point where that I do want to get to where you kind of call out the church as well for that. And I think that's really important. That's something that I've been on a kick lately with every person that I've talked to about this acknowledgement that the church is failing. And I don't want to get to that yet because I really want to read, just if you're okay with it, the introduction, because I think it's really powerful and it really sets the tone for the book. And I want anybody that's watching this or listening to this to get the book and to read it. And so I'm just going to read this real quick. This is the introduction. It says why we're talking about this. Let's just start here. I never set out to write a book like this. I didn't dream of sitting at my laptop, remembering the darkest corners of my past, reliving moments I'd tried to forget, and offering them up like some kind of redemption story. I didn't want to be the girl known for her mess. I wanted to be the girl known for her ministry, her motherhood, her faith. But here's the thing: God doesn't always use the polished parts of us. More often, he uses the pieces we'd rather hide. This book is about shame. It's about sex. It's about trauma and purity culture and the choices we regret. It's about what happens when the church stays silent and what could happen if we finally decided to speak. And it's about Jesus and how he meets us in the wreckage and whispers, "You're still mine." And that really is what the book is about. How did you choose to come to that message?
Because I myself found myself so many times in a place where I thought, it's too much. I'm too far gone. For sure God's not going to take me back this time. And I've sat so many times across from a woman, knee to knee with a woman who's told me, for sure, I'm too far gone. For sure, I've done too much. And it's time that the church wakes up and says to women and to men, no, guess what? You're not too far gone. You haven't done too much. You're not too messy, too dirty, too broken. You haven't had too many partners for God to use you, to speak to you, to love you, to show you your worth. And I think that this is the transactional sex, the shame, that is actually one of the roots of abortion. And so if we're going to talk about being pro-life, then we have to talk about all of this too. And it's just time to make people uncomfortable, time to shake things up and to just talk about the true things that people are struggling with.
And when you go out and you speak, are these the things that you speak about?
Yeah, most recently I've started speaking about this more since the book has been published, but I also have some stories that I share about my pro-life journey, how my mom, was told to have an abortion by her physicians and her family, and there actually was an abortion appointment scheduled to take my life, and my mom didn't go to her appointment, so I shared that story. And then I had an unplanned pregnancy in my early 20s, and I shared that story. And then our oldest daughter, my stepdaughter, also had an unplanned pregnancy, and I shared that story. So my speaking topics are multifaceted, but this story, the We Do Talk About It story, and the stories about sexual shame is a huge part of what I share when I speak also.
Do you find when you're working with people that come into a Reliance Center that sexual shame is a big part of their stories as well?
Yes. Yep. I mean, more than 75% of the people that we see have struggled with something in their past, or it is, you know, they tell us how many partners they've had, or they tell us about a sexual encounter that they had. They don't make eye contact with us. They look down. They won't look at us. They won't talk about it. And when we tell them, hey, like, you're not just sitting here in front of some church person that's going to judge you. You're sitting in front of a broken person who's probably walked right where you've walked. It's okay to tell me. It's okay. Because I think that, so many people are afraid to run into the church, and they think that pregnancy centers and pregnancy help organizations and people in the pro-life movement, that we're an accurate representation of the church. And really, most of us do a pretty trashy job of representing the church when we won't allow people to speak about their past without flinching. And so, yeah, we sit across from them, and we hear that most of them struggle with sexual shame. And that's how people start making, destructive choices, is because they're stuck in that cycle of shame where they've done something and then they struggle with shame. And so they think, well, I've already done this, I might as well do this. It's just a big cycle.
When they share that, do you then open up about your own story?
Yeah. Yeah. We had a girl come in just a couple months ago, and I happened to do her intake because our other advocate was gone. And, she said, I've been making some really poor decisions. And she said, it's almost like I can't stop. And so I asked her, why? Why do you feel like you can't stop? And she said, well, because I almost feel like I don't deserve anything better. And so I was able to tell her, I was at that point. And she looked at me, and this is the response we always get. She looked at me and she goes, you? And I said, yeah, me. I said, I've been there. I've been there where I just couldn't stop because I thought that was all, that was what I was worth. I was just worth living this lifestyle where I felt like I deserved to live in a dumpster. And she said, but you run this place and you probably go to church. And she said, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, because you're a church lady. And I said, so church ladies are perfect? And she said, well, yeah. And I, got to tell her, absolutely no, church ladies are not perfect. The church is just a hospital of broken people, not a museum of perfect people. And so it's their reaction is always shocking to me because they're always so surprised to think you have a past, you struggled with that. And that's why we need to be real, is because they think that, people who are part of the church and Christians, that we're just these perfect people. And until they see that we're not perfect people, that we're sinners saved by grace, nothing changes.
Right. Because that builds connection. There's a great video about addiction by a gentleman named Yohari, and I can't remember his last name, but Yohari is such a unique name that anybody could find it just by searching Yohari and addiction. And the end result of his TED talk is, to the effect that the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's really the cure to all brokenness is that connection, and people connect with people that they can resonate with, and if I mean, that's why I believe that men connect with men. It's easier for a man, I believe, to open up to me about a past abortion when I tell my story of losing my son to abortion than it is for a man to walk into a room full of women, and just like start talking about something that we've been told for 52 years we shouldn't talk about, especially to women. And so, connecting through brokenness, I think is how we help people heal, right? Like my addiction counselor, um, prior to being a counselor, was a cocaine addict spent many times in jail. Well, I trust him, like, because now he's doing what he does, right? And so I trust him that he knows where I've been, or he's been where I've been. And so whatever advice he's going to give me, is worth something versus somebody who comes straight out of, an amazing and perfect life, goes to school and walks out of the door with an LPC and says, hey, I understand your brokenness because I read it in a book.
Because I
Right.
read the chart. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so I'm sure that it's a blessing to every woman that walks through that door to hear your story, and to understand that there is redemption through Jesus Christ, and to hear the stories of the other people who are working with you, because we're all broken. Most of us are just scared to share that. And many times we're scared to share it because we haven't connected with somebody who shared it, who we can, resonate with. So how did you get involved in the pro-life movement to begin with?
I had my own unplanned pregnancy, and I was a single mom and I needed help with diapers. And I went to a pregnancy center and they gave me diapers, and they were so kind to me and asked me if I needed support or help. And I remember, how kind they were to me. And then when I was ready to transition, I did hair. I was a stylist, and I did hair and makeup for events and things like that. When I was ready to kind of transition out of that world, this job came open at this pregnancy center as a development associate to help raise money. And so I started working for them, and my eyes were opened to not only the horror of abortion, but also the pain of abortion. And then I started talking to my mom and learning more about her choice. She chose life for me, but then she also chose abortion after me, and she had 16 miscarriages after that abortion and was never able to carry a healthy pregnancy after that. And so I was an only child. And her and I were able to have some conversations when I started working at the pregnancy center. And so then working there and seeing the gaps in the pro-life movement and seeing the strength of the pro-life movement, just this fire just started inside of me. And then I started my own organization and started speaking nationally to help raise money for other organizations. And it just kind of became all encompassing. So people are like, what is your hobby? And I'm like, well, this is it. This saving babies and loving mamas. That's it. I don't crochet or collect anything. I just try to save babies and help moms. So
That's amazing. So, so then to become so convicted that you would start your own center is that's really powerful. And I'm just curious what drove you from the position that you were in a pro-life pregnancy center to saying, "Hey, I'm going to go do this on my own."
well, my relationship ended with that pregnancy center. There was some funding issues and things like that, so I left, and I wasn't planning on starting my own organization. But Amy Ford, the founder of Embrace Grace, and Gloria Lida, who is my agent with Ambassador Speakers, the day after I left that organization, they both said to me almost the same exact thing. They said, Heather, you have this vision. You need to lean into that and start your own organization. And I thought, no way. There is no way that I'm going to step out and start a thing. That's too much work. Plus, I'm not qualified for that. I'm just a mess. There's no way that I can do this. And then one more person from Focus on the Family, Robin Chambers from Focus on the Family, also said kind of the same thing to me. And so I did. I leaned into that. And God was really clear about not just opening a pregnancy center or not just, starting an organization to help, but really creating a model that would provide not just pro life help, but pro abundant life help. And so I leaned into that, and he just kept telling me to rely on him because I kind of was like, no, I'm not doing this. And it doesn't work good when you tell God no. And so he just kept saying, rely on me. And that's why our organization is called Reliance, is because that's just the word that he kept repeating to my soul over and over again, was just rely on me. And I got you. Just keep pressing in and listening. And I'm not good at listening. I'm a visionary. And so I tend to like hear something quickly and then take off like a rabid dog. And I'm
Yeah.
not good at being slow. And so God was just clear about relying on him and being intentional. So that's where that came
Yeah.
from.
And so then you started the Reliance Center.
Yeah, Reliance Ministries, and Reliance Center is the medical clinic part of it. And then Reliance House, which we just opened last week, a maternity home transformational living program where women can live from the time they find out they're pregnant till their babies are a year old. And then Reliance Men. We don't think that you can teach a guy to be a dad till he knows how to be a man first. And then Braveheart Coffee, a grace-based employment model where the women can learn job skills and have grace-based employment and learn how to be the most productive members of society and live the most abundant lives possible.
That's a lot of moving pieces, and writing a book, and going around the country and speaking. That takes a lot of energy. So there's no way that you could have another hobby.
No,
I
no
get
time
that.
for hobbies. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I kind of want to sit on each of those because I think that each of those are important. We hear all the time from pro-choice people that the pro-life people only care about the baby until it's born. No one that says that has any understanding of what a pregnancy care center does, because like you said, you first made contact with a pregnancy resource center because you needed diapers, right? Like these centers that are completely donor funded by pro-life donors are providing all kinds of resources throughout pregnancy, but then even after, providing diapers, strollers, car seats, skills. You just mentioned a lot of things, and so I think that's really important for everyone to hear. What all does Reliance Center provide as far as services?
So as far as medical services go, so our clinic, we call ourselves a cost-free reproductive health clinic. So we offer everything that Planned Parenthood does except for transgender drugs, birth control, and abortion. So we offer full STD tests, well woman exams, cancer screenings, prenatal care, all of the basic reproductive health care needs that a woman would need. We do IUD removal. We do birth control consultations so they can learn about birth control about their body, how their body will naturally provide that for them. We do all of those medical services. Then we have an education center where we have classes, everything from healthy pregnancy to childbirth to um, homes of honor to love and logic. Lots of classes that we offer, and it's a tailored program. So we don't just say, well, we have parenting classes on Tuesday at 6. We meet with them and find out exactly what they need and then tailor a program just for them. We have a Hero Mama program where we provide scholarships and internet and ways for single moms to go back to school or to go back to work once they have their kids. We pay rent, we pay for electricity, we buy cars, we give gas cards. I think last year alone, we spent almost $20,000 paying rent for moms or deposits for them to get out of places and into new places. We a lot of our finances go to benevolence, to helping make sure that they have what they need. And that's in addition to diapers and wipes and clothes and maternity clothes and, you know, grocery gift cards. If a mom needs it, we provide it. And then the help is also there for a dad. We had a dad come in who he just found out his girlfriend was pregnant, and he said, I want to learn how to be the best dad possible. So he came to classes, and his baby was just born yesterday, and we were able to give him this cool dad, looked like an army backpack, for a diaper
Yeah,
bag and a car seat and everything, and he just felt so loved and so supported here. And the mom didn't come here for classes, just the dad did. And so we were able to love him, and he felt supported. And so we got a picture last night of him doing skin on skin with his brand new baby. And that was pretty cool too.
that is cool. So, I mean, that's a lot, Heather.
Mhm.
Like providing rent. That's something that people don't think about. All the criticisms that come towards the pro-life movement, but people want to help. Like we
Mhm.
want to help the mom. Like, right? We want to help the baby. It's not forced birth, which is just the craziest terminology that I've ever heard. But there is a deep care for people and for humans that is underlying the entire pro-life movement, and that goes beyond you have to have a baby. um
And and we walk with them through. I mean, I was telling someone this the other day. We had a mom that's been with us since we first opened, and so her son just turned 7. And the other day she called and said he needed shoes for PE for school. And I said, we got you, girl. We'll buy him PE shoes. And so 7 years later, she's sustaining her own life, but she needed a little extra help. So it's not like we just helped her till she had the baby and then we were like, you're on your own. 7 years later, she said, and my son needs basketball shoes. And so we got them for her. It's about supporting her until she no longer wants us to walk with her, but we hope we can walk with her forever. But we want to teach her to be self-sufficient.
and does that kind of gets into Braveheart coffee as well, right?
Hmm.
Like I'd really like to hear about that, because I don't you'll be the first person that I've spoken to who has a pregnancy resource center, and well, there's a lot here. You're the first person I've spoken to who has a pregnancy resource center and a maternity home and a business for the moms to work in. So
So, yeah, the business is not up and running yet. So that's the last phase of our model. So we have been open for 7.5 years. So in 7.5 years, we've gotten this far to opening the maternity home, and the coffee shop is the next phase, the last phase. So it's not open yet. But our model is that, similar to a lot of centers might have a thrift store or, something like that where they're bringing in income. But we thought, why not make it something where there's lots of customer service aspects, lots of room for them to interact with people? Because just like we started off talking, relationships is where life happens. And so we thought a coffee shop, because we can roast coffee, we can make coffee drinks, we can have a little deli, a little lunch, so they can learn how to make coffee, how to roast coffee, and then how to wait on customers and how to have those relational, conversations with people. And also like I said, we call it grace-based employment, where a lot of our patients and our clients that we serve, they're not used to having a job, keeping a job. So they have a bad day, they go to work, they tell their boss off, and they get fired because you can't go to work and tell your boss off. You can't take it out on you, or you can't go to work and throw stuff around, or, throw a tantrum at work. You get in trouble, you get written up, or you get fired. And so the grace-based employment model is that, a girl has a bad day, she comes to work, she tells her boss off. And instead of saying, you're fired, leave, we say, what's going on? What are you struggling with? Why are you upset? And we allow them to know that it's safe for them to talk to us about what they're struggling with. And so hopefully we can de-escalate them and they can stay for their shift, but they can learn that how they need to be as a productive employee. But then we can teach them about those relationships that are important. The supervisor, the people, a lot of the people that we serve don't like authority figures. And so teaching them that you don't have to be afraid of authority, that people in authority are in authority to take care of you, to protect you, to shelter you, to provide for you. And so we're hoping that will change the way that they look at authority, and that, like I said, offer that grace-based employment.
do they? So first of all, I want to say that I think that the service industry is an amazing idea. I believe, having worked in restaurants and bars for 17 years, from the time I was 16 until I was 33, um, I think that is the best training ground for any career you can possibly have. My wife is a dentist, and we have hired people. One of the best paralegals I ever had when I was practicing law, I hired her straight from a bar. I wasn't actually at the bar, but that's where she was working when she came in to apply. Um, no paralegal experience, but I knew that she had been bartending, and I could tell by her personality she was a hard worker, and she ended up being an amazing paralegal, to the point where when I stopped practicing law, we moved her to my wife's office, and she became one of the dental assistants, and now is working on becoming a hygienist. So I think that when my kids turn 16, they're going to work in a restaurant. Like there's no question. Like that's where they're going to learn interpersonal skills. They're going to learn how to have a bad day, right? Because people are going to come in with their own bad day, and they're going to take it out on the staff, and you have to learn on your feet how to handle that without taking it personally, and how to try to flip it back around on them. Which is exactly what you're saying with the grace-based model, which is that what you're going to do as the supervisors is going to flip that bad day around on the employee, teaching them the skill that they need to be able to do that with other people, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, my husband and I both worked in the service industry for a very long time, and so we agree with that, and that's why we thought it was the perfect model for them to learn how to have good relationships.
Yeah. Tell me about Reliance Men.
Yeah, well, and this was born out of my husband's struggles growing up, having fathers who weren't really engaged and not ever learning his worth and his value until really the middle of our marriage, when we were, our marriage kind of imploded. And so he, was saying to me that he never ever knew that he had worth and value. And he always felt like he was pushed into a corner. And he always had to come out swinging. And so he said it was really hard for me to learn how to be a dad when I still didn't even know how to be a man. And so that stuck with me, like huge, huge, huge stuck to me. And I thought, well, that's what we're doing, is that we have all these fatherhood programs and we're trying to teach, 1, 2, 3 dad and Dr. Dad and all these things. But how do you learn how to be a dad if you don't even know how to be a man? How do you know how to be a dad when you don't even know what real masculinity looks like? When you grew up being afraid of your dad, you don't even know what a loving father looks like. And you're afraid of the real loving father God, who wants to love you and protect you and provide for you and shelter you, because your own dad was a jerk. And so just really teaching men that they have worth and value. And then also we find that so many men are struggling with some kind of addiction. Well, we all are, women and men, but lots of men are struggling with addiction, whether it's substance abuse or whether it's pornography or sexual addiction. And so, like right now, we have 27 men that are walking with a pornography addiction counselor and learning how to get free from pornography and sexual addiction, because you can't love your wife well or love your partner well. If you're struggling with that yourself, because you're loving yourself well. And so we think that to teach a guy how to be a good dad, you got to teach him how to be a man first. And so we have men that are doing that. Of course, I'm not doing that, and the women on my staff aren't doing that. You said men connect to men, and so we have
Right.
really strong men that step in and walk them through that.
I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you just said. I've been saying that like almost word for word. We at Men for Life are currently working on creating a fatherhood curriculum that can be distributed to pregnancy resource centers that don't have one. And that is, the way you said it is exactly where I'm coming from. That the first objective is to get this young man, once he walks in the door, excited about being a man, to get him excited about understanding what it means to be a man, to understanding what it means to have true masculinity, which I think is the exact word you used. Not this Andrew Tate toxic masculinity, red pill, whatever. Like that's failed masculinity. That's not real, and that's not helpful to anyone. But explaining to them what true masculinity is, to protect, to provide, to lead, and to get them excited about that. And I think that's how we get them coming back, right? Getting these young men excited on the day that they're brought in to the pregnancy center by their significant other, that's how you're going to get them in most of the time. But how do we keep them? And if we're just talking about pregnancy, if we're just talking about fatherhood, to a man who didn't have, just like you said, a man who didn't have a good father, didn't have a father at all, didn't have any male role model, then we're missing that connection. But if we can get him excited about what it means to be a man, to where, he gets, his heart rate up in that first meeting and wants to come back, then we've got him. And when I say we've got him, what I'm talking about is we've got someone who is excited to build upon who he is and to become the man that God created him to be. I like to reference the scene from Gladiator where the emperor is down in the arena, and I don't know if you've seen this movie, but I'm going to go through it anyway. And Maximus has his helmet on, and he says, "Gladiator, tell me your name." And he says, "My name is Gladiator," and starts turning around. And the emperor gets furious, and he says, "You will turn around and tell me your name and take your helmet off." And he takes his helmet off, and he says, "I am Maximus Decimus Meridius." I need to memorize this because as much as I talk about it, I should know exactly what he says. But he says, "I am the father to a murdered son, the husband to a murdered wife, the leader of the Roman legions." He goes through this story, and by the end, this is a man who knows who he is, what he's fighting for, why he's fighting for them, and what he's going to do next. And it's so powerful of an identity story in 45 seconds that anyone who sees that knows who this man is. And that's who every man wants to be, whether they realize that or not. They want to be a man who knows who he is, what he's fighting for, why he's fighting for it, and what he's going to do next. And I think if we can drive that excitement in young men to be a man, then yes, then we can help them to become fathers. Then we can help build an entire generation of good men, not just good pro-life men. Pro-life because that's where our messaging is coming from and that's what we believe, but good men who are there not only for their kids but for their wives or their significant others, and for themselves. And so, sorry, like to hear you explain like your objectives and your reasoning behind it, and to know that it's mimicking exactly what I've been saying is just really exciting for me.
I love that. No, I love that. And I also believe that our culture, our society tells men you don't have a say. What's the saying? No to uterus, no opinion. Which is funny because now they're saying that, girls can be boys and boys can be girls, however that works. But um so many of the men that we say, well, how do you feel about this pregnancy? And they say, whatever she wants. And then when we look at him and say, but what do you want? And they'll say, well, I don't think abortion is okay, but it's not my choice. And so they believe the lie. They believe the lie that they don't have a say because we've taught them that they just need to, that they can't be bold, courageous, humble. That's our tagline for Reliance Men is bold, courageous, humble, because you can't teach men to be bold without also teaching them to be humble. You can't teach them to be courageous without also teaching them to be kind, right? And so it all flows into one. And I love that you and I have never talked about that. So I love that our visions are the same because I feel like that's the heart of the Father for sure.
100%. And it's funny today. I put out two posts. One short on no uterus, no opinion, and another one was a podcast with Clover Carroll with the White Rose Resistance, and his entire message is "Be bold." And so that was the title of the podcast that I put out. So it's like today was the day that we were supposed to have this conversation. But I think you're right. I think that and and look, I believe that men are the last or missing piece to ending abortion, because they've been looked over, neglected as having any by the pro-life side, neglected or looked over as having any value to ending abortion. Not that the pro-life movement is not seen men as valuable, but that they weren't a necessary piece. And they're the last piece because we've been focusing as a movement on the mother, on the baby. And now, if we focus on the men and we build strong men who are leading their families and protecting and providing, then we can end it, and I really believe that. I believe that is the next the next step and possibly, the last step. And I love that you're ahead of that. When I was at Heartbeat International, I had 104 different pregnancy centers stop at our exhibit and ask about fatherhood curriculums. So this isn't just you and me talking about this. Like, this is an understanding that is having like a compounding effect within the pro-life movement on how do we help to end abortion. And it's amazing that you guys are ahead of it, and it's amazing that you're doing it with the vision that you are.
Well, God's vision and just trying to walk it out.
Yeah. Pro-life, whole life, for life. What does that mean?
Well, obviously, that means, pro-life. I like to say that, unapologetically pro-life. There's never a reason why a woman should choose abortion. But she'll never ever understand the value of the life growing inside of her until she understands the value of her own life. And so that comes from deep within inside me, finally realizing my worth and my value. and wanting all these women to understand that, their whole life. Um, and then just knowing that, Jesus didn't die on the cross for us to live an okay life. He died on the cross for us to live an abundant life. And if we're missing any part of that piece, for it all to come together, then we're missing all of it. I feel like it has to all be one. We can't just be pro-life for the baby. We can't just be pro-life for the mom. And we can't just be pro-life because we're supposed to be, because that's what it says in the Bible. If we're not doing all of those pieces all together, I think we're missing the mark.
Yes, 100%. I'm going to come back to the book now because
Okay.
I know that that's probably the most exciting thing that you've got going on.
It's
Um,
all
other that
exciting.
other than the fact that you just opened the maternity home, and in fact, I want to talk about the maternity home because that's a piece that is oftentimes overlooked with pro-choice people as well. I don't even think they realize, or I think most people are genuine in their ignorance, so to speak. They believe the lies, like you said earlier, and don't take the effort to look deeper into it. I think that the understand or the belief that pro-life only cares about the baby until it's born. I think that that's just a lie that people have believed because the comments that I get and the things people say are so false,
Right.
and so provably false that if they took any effort to look into it, they would recognize that it's wrong. But maternity homes are something that uh, I became familiar with when I was on the board for our local pregnancy resource center, and we talked about starting a maternity home. But before that, I didn't even realize that that was a thing. So tell us about the maternity home.
Yeah. So Reliance House was created because we found so many times that women, one of the things that they struggle with is housing, right? But it's not just that they don't have a place to stay, it's that they had probably 10 times that I can count. We helped a mom pay first and last month's rent, get her into a new apartment, buy her furniture, fill her kitchen with food, and then 2 months later, she can't pay her rent and she gets kicked out. Or 2 months later, she breaks the rules of the apartment complex and gets kicked out. Or, she has someone who is a felon living with her and gets kicked out or something like that. So we were trying to provide housing for these women, but it wasn't lasting, and we were just giving them a place to stay. We weren't transforming their lives. So we created Reliance House as a transformational living program. So they enter the program and they have to be working or going to school at least 20 or 30 hours a week. They have to have clean UAs. They can't have any substance abuse issues. We do share a border with Washington, so we have a little bit of leniency for marijuana, but they only get two times where they get caught with that, and then there's consequences. But they have to be clean from substances. They have to be going to school. They have to enter a program with a licensed mental health counselor and a coach that's going to help them financially. And, they have to really do the work. So the program that they enter is not just a crash pad, not just a place for them to live, but the home itself. We paid cash for, and everything that's inside of it, we paid cash for. We didn't take out any debt. And that was a huge thing for us, to honor God in that and not take out any debt. But the home is beautiful. And people, when we got ready to move in, and people said, well, I have this couch and this chair and this table. And we said, I bet that your couch and your chair and your table is beautiful, but we don't want this to look like someone's first college apartment. We want it to look beautiful. And we want these women to walk inside this house and feel like they have dignity and feel like they have worth. And so each room is themed. We have a pink room, a green room, an orange room, a blue room, and we had different people sponsor the room. So the blue room is the St. Joseph Suite, and it's got, beautiful blue linen and a blue rug and a crib, and, everything in it is new and beautiful. And so the girl that stays there, the mom that stays there, will walk into that room and feel hopefully like she's home and feel like she has worth and value, maybe for the first time in her entire life. When we opened on Thursday, we did an open house with our community, and so many people that walked through said, Heather, this is beautiful. I would love to live here. This is nicer than my house, and what a gift that was for them to say that. But we want these women to know that they don't deserve something that is secondhand or second rate, that they deserve first class, because that's how Jesus loves us. He loves us with a love that's lavish and it's first class love. And until you can experience that firsthand, sometimes you don't understand the depth of the Father's love for us. And sometimes I made a Facebook post joking about it, but sometimes that lavish love comes in gold spice racks and fluffy towels. Sometimes that's what
Yes.
it looks like. Yeah.
Well, I think I do think that there's actually science behind this, but just anecdotally, I think there's something to be said about how you feel in your surroundings in the place that you are in, you know, and I think that it's special. Like what you're describing is special, and in many cases for a woman who maybe has never been made to feel special, you know, and so it's driving that transformation that you spoke about earlier. It's driving the self-worth. You are worthy of living in a place that you believe is beautiful and that makes you feel peace and happiness. And so that's an awesome vision, and how amazing that you guys have gotten that accomplished. What is the timeline for getting for women moving in?
We have our first resident moving in next week.
Wow.
So,
So in a maternity home, is there someone also living there who is monitoring? I don't know if monitoring is
yeah,
the right
so
word.
we have a house. Usually it's called like a house mom, but we're calling her our
Okay.
house manager. So she'll live
Okay.
there 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then we have different stuff. Like my manager of relational operations that works for me here will go over one morning a week and be there, and I'll be there one morning a week so that our house manager can go uh, do her water aerobics at the pool, and give her a little bit of reprieve. And then one day a week we'll have someone go and cover for her so that she can have a day off. But yeah, someone will live there 24 hours a day, just like a real parent would, a real mom would, so
Yeah.
that these girls have someone to do life with.
Yeah. Is there is this for women who either are pregnant or have just had a child, or like is there a limit on how many kids? I don't know how
Yeah,
else to
so
ask the
we
question.
can we can have we can have a woman who's pregnant or a woman who's pregnant with children, but she can't have more than 3 children, and the children can't be above age 12.
Okay.
So like if a woman has, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and is pregnant, we will accept her, but we will only take one woman with children, and the
Yeah.
other women have to be just pregnant or have just had their baby.
And is that just a space issue?
Just a space issue. Yeah. If
Yeah.
we had a giant mansion, we would take everyone. But yeah,
One
just a
day.
space issue. Yeah.
One day. Man, that's really amazing. And that just brings me joy, because I think that is how you transform people's lives,
Hmm.
and it started with the center, and just kind of ministering to the women, and now there's so many other things going on and so many other ways to help. And not only that, there's an affiliation, right, with
Yeah.
Reliance.
Yeah. Reliance Ministries, we have a model where if there's a pregnancy center or an organization that's struggling to find their mission and their vision, we come alongside them and help them hone that in and get it really clear. And then we have an affiliation model so that if they want to affiliate with us and become the Reliance Center of um, Knoxville, Tennessee, then they would affiliate with us. We just had our first affiliate come on officially in Grangeville, Idaho, which is about an hour and a half south of us. and they've been pregnancies that are open for 20 years, and they were doing self-read pregnancy tests, and they weren't medical, and they were doing lots of Bible studies and classes and things like that, but they really have seen the landscape shift, especially here in Idaho, and so they decided to affiliate with us, and we will do their grand opening in about a month and a half, and we will open them medical, so they'll be doing ultrasounds and STD testing and be able to offer that care in their own community. Yeah, so we come alongside centers who want to do more and provide, excellent care in their community, and they can affiliate with us, and we provide them all our policies and procedures and all of that stuff. So when God gave me the vision, he said that he wanted to, he wanted it to go out to the nation. So it's a little bit scary, but we're doing it.
Yeah, but when God first gave you the vision, you said no.
I did say no. Yeah, now I'm just doing it scared. So
And I think that's interesting. I wonder how many other people have a similar story. When I stopped practicing law and Men for Life started asking me if I would come and run the organization, I said no, emphatically no. Like I am not. I don't. Same things you said. Like I don't know how to run a nonprofit. I have an idea of how much money you make running a nonprofit, and I've got 5 little kids, and so no. And I said no for 18 months, and we hired this like really high powered business consultant in California, and I had all these. I was on an airplane last June. It might have been like today last year, and had like all these documents and profit and loss sheets and business plans that I've been working on, and I was on an airplane, and God said, "You're going to go run this nonprofit," like super clear. It was just like, "This is what you're going to do." And I hadn't talked to them in 4 months. I didn't even know they were still looking. And I walked into that meeting, and I took all these papers and I set them down on the desk, and I said, "I have everything you asked for that we've been working on, but let me tell you what just happened." And similar to kind of what you said, like I wanted him to say, "This is a horrible idea," so that I could blame him for not listening to God, and not knowing if he's pro-life, not knowing anything like that, because that's not why I hired him. And he said, this is a great idea. This is going to get you all the things that you have been telling me that you're trying to get out of life. And I will help you to build this organization, through everything you've already paid me for. And so I turned back around and got on the airplane and said, "Hey guys, if you're still looking, like I'll take the job." And that's how I got involved in this. But it was an absolute no for almost 2 years. And now I could not be happier. Like I was right about the money, but
right. Our
um,
reward is in heaven for
that's
sure.
right. But it's so fulfilling, and it's so cool to have a job that I can share with my kids, and that I can be happy, and the reason I stopped practicing law is because even when I was home, I wasn't present. I just wasn't here. I was always working in my head. And so it just, I wasn't the dad that I wanted to be. And now I am, I'm still working on it, but now I'm better able to accomplish that. So it's just crazy how once you submit to God and say, "I trust you fully, and I'm going to do what you're telling me to do," he opens all these doors and just makes it all work, and brings you a fulfillment. Because this is my hobby too. Like there's nothing else. I do work out every day, because if I don't, I'm not nice. But other than that, like this is what my hobby is, and it's so fulfilling. So I love to hear that I'm not the only one that tried to turn God down in the beginning. And I also love to hear what it's like so many years later, as you keep building upon that and building upon that, and all the doors that God has continued to open for you, to allow you to serve more people, to serve not only women, but to serve men, to serve mothers, to serve, in the next phase, to be able to serve those women with jobs, and life skills through working those jobs. I think that's really exciting.
It
It's
is
really exciting.
exciting. The hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but it's also the most fulfilling. And I wouldn't trade it for. We have this joke here at the center when we have a bad day that we're all going to go work at Applebee's, because that's where I bartended and I worked at Applebee's forever. So we always joke that we're going to go work at Applebee's, but I wouldn't trade this for Applebee's ever. because it's the most fulfilling thing ever, but it's the hardest thing I've ever done. So,
Right. It is a lot of work. All right, I'm going to come back to the book. I know we're getting close on time, so but I do want to hit on a couple of things, and then I want to talk about what's coming up at the end of the month for you. Um, so I've got a couple of clips from the book. Um, Sex outside of God's design doesn't empower you; it enslaves you. It binds you to secrets, to lies, to shame, to spiritual confusion and emotional chaos. Tell me what that means to you.
our culture today tells people just do what makes you happy. Just do what feels good, just what makes you happy. And so we get stuck in this transactional cycle of doing what makes us happy. And all it does is make us sick. And we see so many people that are, now we don't even call it like uh, I'm I just turned 44, so I'm 44. So back when I was in high school, it was you if you had sex with someone and there was a relationship, we called it hooking up, right? Now they don't even call it that; they call it talking. Like we're just talking, and I say, well, what does that mean? And they say, well, it means we're having sex. I said, talking means you're having sex? Like that doesn't make sense to me. But we've so far removed the emotional sacredness of sex, and we've just brought it down to this transactional animalistic thing, and it makes us sick. It makes us sick. When I look at marriages, my own marriage and my friends' marriages, when we talk about marriages where they waited and it's just the two of them, how much different their sex life is inside their marriage. And so, yeah, it makes us sick as a society. It makes us sick as husbands and wives. It makes us sick as, partners looking for. I think about my grandchildren and I'm like, oh, like I just wish that I could just put them in a bubble and protect them, because by the time they get to that age where they're looking at relationships, I just feel like our society has gotten to a place where um, the sex outside of marriage, the transactional sex, is just making us sick.
Right. And, and a lot of times people will say things like, if it doesn't affect you, and this is people speaking directly to me as a man in the pro-life part of the debate, if it doesn't affect you, then keep your head out of it, keep your mind out of it. Right. But it does affect me because of what you just talked about. It affects me because I care about what direction society goes because I have kids, and one day I'll have grandkids. And I agree with you. Like, I mean, I'm 47, so pretty close. And and it has changed so much in the last 25 years, and in the last 10 years, and it's going to continue to change unless we change it, right? And so that's why I think it's so important, the work that you're doing, transforming lives of the women, but also of the men. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping to build good men, because if we can affect a new generation or the next generation, then, we can change that, right? We can change bloodlines. We can change society. And so it does affect me. All of this affects me. All of this affects you. It affects everyone. It is, I mean, you know, I think that abortion, if left on its own, it creates societal chaos. And that's like many other issues do, but I think that, that's why it's important. And so I think it is important for us to stay in this fight, and it's important for us to transform. I'm going to keep using your word, to transform the lives of those people that we come into contact with, who may not have ever heard the message, may not have ever heard the message of hope, may not have ever heard the message of Jesus Christ, may not have ever heard any message of their own worth, like you've said, and to really help to build them up, because then they can build up the next generation, and we can change the direction that all of this is going, because it's not great.
No,
It's
we're all just seeking what's going to make us happy in the moment. And I tell people, I don't really care if you think I'm nice, and I don't really care if you're happy. I care if you think I'm kind, and I care if you have joy. The rest of it is trash. Doing what makes you happy and being nice is trash. Being kind and doing what brings you joy and what makes you holy is what God wants. He doesn't want us to be happy. I don't think God really cares about our happiness. I think he cares about us having joy.
I like that. Can you expound on that? The difference between happiness and joy in that context?
Yeah, happiness is fleeting. I mean, happiness, is, you go eat a whole pizza because you want it, and then afterwards you're sick. The happiness is gone. But if you think about if you've ever lost someone that you've loved, and at their funeral, someone shares a story and you smile and laugh, well, you laugh and you smile because you have that joy of remembering their life. But are you happy in that moment? No, because you're grieving the loss of them, and joy is a fruit of the spirit. So when you accept Christ and you're walking in that life, you have joy that's deep down inside of you. But happiness is something that can change with your circumstances. It can change with your mood. It can change with the weather. Happiness is super fleeting, but joy is not fleeting. Joy is something that is eternal, and we're promised joy in different seasons of our life. And joy is a fruit of the spirit. So I tell that to so many of our clients. We say, don't chase happiness, because happiness is fleeting. And when I was chasing happiness and I was cheating on my husband at a cheap, seedy motel in Shreveport, Louisiana, I was happy until I walked out of the hotel room and walked past the dumpster and thought, that's where I belong, because the enemy had stolen my joy. I had given over my joy because I was chasing happiness.
Yeah. I can kind of connect that to drugs. If someone says, well, like, my kids will ask, well, and this isn't how I answer them, but this is my real answer. Like, why did you do drugs? Well, it was awesome. Like, honestly, like, I did drugs because drugs made me feel amazing, until they didn't. It was the difference between happiness and joy. The immediate dopamine hit, the immediate endorphins. It was awesome, but then it made me sick. Everything that you just said, and you can't get it back. You can't chase that same happiness. And I think you're right. I think that's where society is failing, in seeking a constant chase of happiness, because you can never really achieve it. But if you're seeking joy, I really like everything you just said. I think that's really important and really powerful. Um, so the last thing that I want to take out of the book is what we talked about in the beginning, which is the church. So this one's a little bit longer, but you wrote, you'd think the church would be the safest place to talk about things like this. After all, it's supposed to be a hospital for the broken, not a stage for the perfect. But in reality, the church has often been one of the most unsafe places to share stories of sexual pain, especially for women. Why? Because we haven't created room for real conversations. We've created sanitized sanctuaries. We preach purity, but don't know what to do with the impure. We shout about sin, but get quiet when it comes to abuse. We quote verses about forgiveness, but rarely sit long enough to hear the full story. And the result: silence, shame, secrets. Men are afraid to talk about lust and pornography. Women are afraid to talk about their longing to be desired. Men hide their sexual addictions. Women hide their sexual trauma. And in that silence, the enemy thrives. He whispers, "You're the only one." And we believe him. This connected with me a lot. And in that silence, the enemy thrives. He whispers, "You're the only one." And we believe him. I think that may be, for me, the most powerful part of the book, because that sentence, or those two last sentences, and in that silence the enemy thrives, he whispers, "You're the only one," and we believe him, is is why I do what I do. It's because for for the 8 years after I lost my son to an abortion, I'd never spoke about it. until I went to treatment. And for the 7 years after I went to treatment, the first 7 years after I went to treatment, I never spoke about it. Because I believed I was the only one. Even though when I went to treatment, they gave me permission to heal, they gave me permission to mourn, they gave me permission to feel that, and I began healing that part of it so that I could actually move forward with my life. I still believed I was the only man who had any of these feelings about that until the first time I spoke about it. And 3 men came up and said, I've never told anyone this, right? I've suffered in silence too. I've never told anyone this, 20 years, 30 years. One of them hadn't even told his wife. But I had a child that was aborted. Maybe these men fought against it like I did. Maybe these men pushed for the abortion. It didn't matter. They still were dealing in silence with grief and shame and guilt and regret because they believed they were the only one. And that happens every single time that I speak, and just like you sitting across the table from that young lady who has a hard time believing that you have ever experienced anything like what she's experienced, because she feels like she's the only one. And it is because of the silence of the church. Like, I believe that. I believe, and I'm Catholic, and you would think, as much as Catholicism and pro-life and abortion are put together in sentences, that growing up in the Catholic Church, going to Catholic school my whole life, that I would have heard one time a priest on the altar speaking about abortion. But I'm 47 years old, and I can say unequivocally that I have never been in a church where a priest has spoken from the altar about abortion. Maybe the day after Roe versus Wade was overturned, they commented on that, but never about what abortion is, how destructive it is, why we believe that it's wrong. Never about the healing that can come from Jesus Christ if you've ever dealt with that. They don't talk about it. And because they don't talk about it, you have these entire congregations of people who think that it's not okay to talk about it.
I think they're the only
You know,
one that struggle with it.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's not a Catholic issue. I've talked to so many people who have been dealing with this in their own churches, evangelical, Baptist, whatever, and that's their messaging is to churches, and that's where you're coming from as well, and that's why it's so important when you say we do talk about it, But I want you to talk about the church too, because I think it's really important, and this is your book that I'm like overtaking your message.
No, no, I love that. And that is, that there's several parts of the book. And that is when you were reading that, I was like, oh, try not to tear up, because that is when in that meeting, when that my, manager said to me, we don't talk about that. I immediately felt branded. Like, I thought, here's this giant scarlet letter on my chest. Now I'm, this awful girl that they just hired that's had this awful past. And I thought, I don't belong here. I just need to leave and go back to Applebee's. Like, I mean, I don't belong here. And I never want anyone else to feel that way, to feel like I don't belong here or my story is too much or too dirty. And I just feel like as a church, we're so afraid to talk about this issue because we say it's a political issue, or it's, and I'm sorry, but it's not. This issue about sex and about life and about abortion is not a political issue. It is a biblical issue. And because shame started in the garden, it did, and we brought that into us, and in us, in our sin nature. But that's why Jesus died on the cross. He died on the cross so that we could be forgiven, so that we didn't have to live in shame. And I feel like so many times churches and people in church leadership confuse shame and conviction, and they want to use shame to convict people. And one of my favorite sayings, I think it was TD Jakes who said it. I don't remember, but he said, you can't punish someone to purity. And I love that so much because it's so true, is that you can't punish someone to purity. But also purity culture of like the 90s, like when I grew up, purity culture was twisted, right? So I thought I was dirty and broken and wrong because I had sex. But the fact is that purity is a posture of your heart. And so you have the ability to have a pure heart, even if you have made some destructive decisions with your body. Purity is a posture of the heart. And I think the church confuses that too often as well. And we just are putting this message out that everyone's just dirty and broken and you just have to deal with it. And that's why Jesus died, is so you can go to heaven and be set free. But we don't ever talk about what you need to be set free from. We don't ever get into those
Yeah.
conversations because it's too messy.
Right. And it doesn't feel good, and so many churches have been leaning towards feel good gospel, and feel good preaching. And like you said, God doesn't want us to be happy. He wants us to find joy. And the only way to find joy is in Jesus Christ. And so the only way to find joy is to truly live that message, and we're not living that message if we're telling people, as long as you're happy, then Jesus loves you. Of course, Jesus loves you. Like, like, yes, Jesus loves you, and He wants better for you. He wants you to have a full life. He doesn't just forgive you; He calls you then to something greater. And so, I think that it's really important, that the churches hear this message, and the only way the churches are going to hear this message is if we talk about it, right? And that kind of gets back to the title of your book, which is perfect. We do talk about it, and you are talking about it, and you are talking, more coming up here at the end of this month at the Celebrate Life conference in DC on the anniversary of Dobbs. And you're going to be talking several times.
Yeah, I'm doing two breakout sessions. One of them is on Friday, and that is from sexual shame to merciful redemption, talking about the message about sexual shame. And that's with Monica Klein from It Takes a Family and Linda Ferry from Sidewalk Advocates. We'll be talking, it'll be a whole panel about sexual shame. And then we're doing another panel the next day about life giving hope and practical help for moms in crisis. So talking about all the things we talked about earlier about, how the pro-life movement provides real help. It's not just about saving
Yeah.
babies. It's about real help.
Well, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear both of those talks, and to get to see you in person again at Celebrate Life conference. Before we close out, is there anything else that you want to add? How can people find you? How can people support you? I know that I already mentioned this, but it's really important to me to say it again, that Reliance Ministries and Reliance House and Reliance Men, it's all a nonprofit, a 501c3, donor funded. So if this message resonates with anybody, give us the websites so that people can go and they can find you, and they can help to support you.
So there, first of all, my book is this is what it looks like. You can find it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or paperback, and then I'll be doing voicing the audible version so people can listen to my voice as they're going to sleep. It's kind of scary.
And I
But the
will have a
book,
link to the book in the show notes. And I'm going to use the pictures that you sent, so they will
perfect.
have already seen a picture of the cover when we start.
Awesome. And then, yeah, relianceministries.com is where you can find us, all about our hope model. Reliancecenter.org is our medical website if you need help and you're in our area. And then I'm on social media, Heather Lawless or Heather3130 is my social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I'd love to connect. And we're just so thankful for, partnership with you and for the work that you do for men and for life. And it's so cool to see this kingdom work, all collaborating to, love women and save hearts and souls. And it's just so exciting.
Well, thank you so much for Heather for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks for having me on.